penchant for projection is also no secret. But this isn't just another squabble born of emotional neediness. It now includes a general in the White House who, caught in an incorrect claim, sends out an employee paid by your tax dollars to tell you that general is not subject to debate because he's a general. Let me say this tonight to General Kelly. You will be debated. You will be questioned. And you now have an obligation to retract this odd White House spokesperson claim. Our Constitution explicitly places the military under civilian control. That matters not only for this week's rhetorical sparring, whatever it is, whatever it was supposed to be, but also, far more importantly, as I hope we all know, for the underlying incident that sparked it, which the Trump White House has so vigorously distracted from: the death of 4 U.S. soldiers, the injuries of 2 others near the Niger-Mali border. The FBI is investigating it. The Trump administration thus far has been quite secretive. Now, we have no idea if the findings here would show that anything should be done differently. It's way too early to say. But again, it will be questioned. That's how our system works, even if some in the Trump administration don't want to understand that.
The powers of the president to protect our country are very substantial and will not be questioned.
I'm joined now by Ken Delaney, an NBC's intelligence national security reporter, and Ned Price, who worked for the National Security Council under the Obama administration and also for the CIA. Ned, your view of what General Kelly sent out his employee to say today?
Well, Ari, I think you had it exactly right. It's Article 2 of the Constitution that says the President of the United States, a civilian leader, is the commander-in-chief. And frankly, not only is the military subordinate to civilian leadership, but generals, leaders within the military, have a special responsibility to tell the truth under military guidelines, military code of justice. So for General Kelly to go out there and to make what could well have been an honest mistake. Look, everyone makes honest mistakes, sure, even generals. But he now has a special obligation to go out and correct the record. You know, Ari, there are countries in the world in which generals, decorated generals, purport to have a monopoly on the facts. This is not one of them. This has never been one of them, and we must work to make sure that we never become one of those countries.
Well put, and I know you served. Ken, I want to play something else General Kelly said yesterday when there was an initial response in Washington and I think elsewhere that part of his comments were really effective and were really heartfelt. And Lord knows he has served. And yet there were other parts yesterday and in what he's overseeing today that appeared dead wrong. And part of the discussion yesterday, at one point, he said he wasn't going to call on all the journalists or use any, random method. He only wanted to hear from journalists who had a link to the military. Take a listen.
Does anyone here know a Gold Star parent or sibling? Okay, you get the question. Any other? Someone who knows a Gold Star fallen person. John, I'll take one more, but it's got to be from someone who knows. All right. I do appreciate your time.
Ken, I wonder your response to that, because as an American, you have tremendous respect for the Gold Star families. In fact, we heard from one on this program this week. But as a public servant paid by the tax dollars of this country in an open press setting, that really stood out.
Yeah, Ari, I think it's a really dangerous road to go down. And I think, for example, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said just in the last hour to reporters that he thought it was an inappropriate thing for Sarah Sanders to say, that, of course, a general can be questioned in our democracy. And in fact, what I've been reporting on all day are the very legitimate questions that the civilian oversight staffers in Congress have been raising about what actually happened in Niger and whether there was an intelligence failure and how 50 enemy militants could amass near our 12 special operations folks without the U.S. military figuring out that they were there. And so these questions are now being raised about this incident. This rhetoric, I think, in the end, is not going to have a meaningful impact on how all this is handled. Ari.
Yeah, you mentioned Senator Graham. I have the readout here. This is a Republican senator. He was asked, is it highly inappropriate to debate a 4-star general? And Ned, he responded, no, not in America. This seems different than some of the news cycles of Donald Trump saying ridiculous things. And it seems to go to the heart of whether General John Kelly, Chief of Staff, has an obligation to address and clean this up.
Well, Ari, when General Kelly took his current White House post and when he was commissioned as a general, when he enlisted as a Marine in 1970, he took an oath that said he will protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. He has never taken an oath that he will defend a president at all costs, that he will bend the truth, inadvertent or not, in the service of a president. He has a much greater service, and that is a service to our Constitution. You know, to my mind, General Kelly, his entire career, has been a good soldier. He has been a good soldier when he was an enlisted Marine. He has been a good soldier as a general. But I think what his role demands now is that he be a patriot. He be a good patriot. And as I've said before, those are often one and the same. But I think this administration is really tearing those two concepts apart. And there's a divergence there that's especially dangerous.
Right. And a lot of this goes back to what will the oversight be? What are members of Congress saying here on another Friday night where the Trump administration is making news, what would appear to be, for them, bad news? I want to bring in New York Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. He serves on the Judiciary Committee with me in New York. Is it appropriate to debate a general?
It's absolutely appropriate to debate a general in a democracy. Of course, this is not a military dictatorship. We are a nation of laws, not a nation of men. And pursuant to the rule of law, anyone is subject to being held accountable to those who are charged with representing the people of this great nation in terms of members of Congress and as it relates to members of the Fourth Estate, the media, as embedded in the First Amendment of the United States Constitution.
There was a lot of talk about Trump being changed or disciplined by Kelly. Are we seeing Kelly today sound more like Trump?
That unfortunately appears to be the case. You know, General Kelly served this nation in a phenomenal fashion. That service is to be respected and appreciated. But it is saddening and shocking that he would actually engage in character assassination against a sitting member of Congress, calling her an empty barrel, and then trying to justify that character assassination by misrepresenting the remarks that she gave at the building renaming in 2015. And then for the White House today to double and triple down on that mischaracterization is just consistent with the chaos, crisis, and confusion that we continue to see from the Trump administration. What General Kelly should do is pick up the phone, call Congresswoman Wilson, apologize for the character assassination, and then we can hopefully all move on from this episode and get down to the business of the American people.
Right, and the business of this investigation. I want to ask you, Congresswoman, as well as our panel, to broaden this out, because sometimes these conversations become all about Trump. This today feels quite a bit deeper. You think back to, say, in 1951, we had General Douglas MacArthur butting heads with President Harry Truman about policy for the Korean War, trying to exert political pressure on Truman, appealing directly to the political branches. Truman relieved then a big war hero with an influential following, MacArthur, saying, if there is one basic element in our Constitution, it's civilian control, the military, policies to be made by elected political officials, not generals or admirals. And Truman basically saying he did not want to risk a wider war.
A number of events have made it evident that General MacArthur did not agree with that policy. I have therefore considered it essential to relieve General MacArthur so that there would be no doubt or confusion as to the real purpose and aim of our policy.
Ned Price, that was a very different model of leadership. It was not, by the way, easy within public opinion at the time. But it was something that Harry Truman felt the Constitution was actually in play, not only his own personal reputation, if generals were trying to muscle out civilian control.
Well, that's right. And Ari, frankly, we haven't seen a proliferation of generals in senior civilian leadership in other administrations, at least in recent memory. The White House Chief of Staff, the National Security Advisor, who is a currently serving general. There are other military officials throughout other cabinet departments and agencies that, does not follow that model. And it's interesting when you hear President Trump speak of military leaders, he calls them my generals, which I think really speaks speaks to the way he perceives them. He thinks he can, that they serve him and only him. But I think the key is that they serve our Constitution. They are there to protect our Constitution, to protect our country. And I think, General Kelly and the others who are in this position will continue to need to do that, even risking the ire of President Trump.
Well, you raised such an important point, Ned, and Congressman, I wonder if you could speak to that here. It's not his plane, it's not his White House, and it's certainly not his army. How important is it that you, in a co-equal branch, remind Donald Trump of that when he has a general running the White House comporting himself this way?
Well, it's the people's house, it's the people's democracy, and as you've indicated, Ari, there are separate and co-equal branches of government. It doesn't seem like Donald Trump respects that. It doesn't seem like he respects the Congress and our oversight responsibility. He certainly has showed that he doesn't respect the Article III federal court system and the role that judges are to play in our democracy. He's got autocratic tendencies, and the hope has been that the White House Chief of Staff would actually be able to dampen those tendencies and put Donald Trump on a path where he can function consistent with the manner that other presidents of the United States have functioned, understanding their role and their fundamental accountability to the people that they were elected to serve. It's shameful. We're going to continue to try to focus as Democrats on delivering better jobs, better wages, and a better future. But in the context of the chaos that he constantly inflicts upon the American people, it's always difficult in Washington, D.C.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, thank you for giving us that perspective. Ned Price and Ken Delaney, and appreciate you both.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.